Singapore, an urban jungle in every sense of the word. In between the many skyscrapers and HDBs that dot our skyline, one can find pockets of canals, reservoirs, and green spaces to mangroves by the sea. In the intersection where the urban meets the natural, wildlife has sprung up and has made the urban jungle part of its home. Beyond urban environments, Singapore houses 4 nature reserves and 20 other protected nature areas with many native species. In these environments, a balance has been struck, albeit a precarious one, with each ecosystem existing in its own equilibrium. An ecosystem is a dynamic complex of living and non-living elements. Living elements consist of plants, animals, and microorganism communities. The non-living environment includes water, air, and the earth. An ecosystem is formed when the living and non-living elements come together, interacting as a functional unit, where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. But what happens when we introduce new elements to an ecosystem? Of late, reports of people releasing animals into the wild have made the news. Most recently, in December 2018, fishing areas at 2 of the reservoirs in the Central Catchment Nature Reserve had to be closed due to the growing number of Motoro stingrays. Dr. Jeffrey Quick is an expert at the Freshwater Invasion Biology Laboratory at the National University of Singapore. He tells us more about the impact of these stingrays.
The stingrays, they are actually a very popular aquarium fish. But what I think people don't realize is that how big they get. So a lot of people buy these stingrays, and they're from South America. So these are, and there are quite a few species of them. And what happens is that people buy them, they're very expensive, and they grow them out. And when they get too big, 2 things happen. Either one, they get too big and people realize that they don't have the space to keep them, or as in the case of one gentleman, a few years ago, he got bored of them and decided to get a new species which was prettier in his perspective, and then he wanted to replace that, and he released them into the reservoirs, and he got caught by PUB.
These Motoro stingrays are non-native and originate far away from South America. No longer willing to take care of these stingrays, pet owners have released them into Singapore waters. Since then, these stingrays have started breeding and have built a sizable colony. They are considered an invasive species.
The definitions for natives and non-natives is very clear. Anything which stays in Singapore, lives in Singapore, is a native. Anything that comes from outside is a non-native. However, by our definition in our lab, what an invasive is depends on the net harm, the effect that it has to the community, right? And also, for example, does it establish itself after a while? Does it have a direct effect where it feeds on things? Does it have an indirect effect on things where it could somehow affect for example, the food web? Right? Or even the water quality.
The introduction of this new element into the ecosystem has been seen to be problematic, as the stingrays may have upset the existing equilibrium. With the ability to grow in large numbers, they may have competed with existing native species for resources. The immediate non-living environment may also have been affected by this introduction. The Motoro stingrays may just affect water quality in a country where reservoirs are a key source of drinkable water. In Singapore, there are 2 main reasons why animals are released into the wild. The first is irresponsible pet ownership. People sometimes buy pets on moments of impulse without fully appreciating the long-term commitment that comes with pet ownership. Like the earlier example of Motoro stingrays, sometimes pet owners do not understand how large these animals can grow to become, and eventually choose to release them because they are unwilling or unable to care for them any longer. Beyond exotic or wild animals, more common domesticated animals like cats, dogs, and fishes also fall victim to irresponsible pet ownership. Here, We speak to one pet owner who recounts the time when he released his pet turtle when he was young.
Back then, I didn't take care of my pets properly because I was still a little kid, so I was quite irresponsible back then. Yeah. So feeding the pets and cleaning the the enclosure for the pets, right? That was done by my mom. So after a while, she was a bit tired of it, so she just told me, since I'm not taking care of the pet, right, then I should just release it into the wild. And I'm like, okay.
When animals are released, not only will the ecosystem be affected by these new elements, from the perspective of the released animal, this new environment may not be a good fit. Ms. Irong works with the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, or SPCA for short. She tells us more about the fate of pets that have been abandoned by their owners.
So after the animals are being released, and since they are usually domestic animals and they are domesticated, so they are used to having somebody who feeds them and take care of them. So once they are released, they cannot actually fend for themselves. So they end up either being injured by the strays, or eventually they will just hide in a corner and probably starve. Yeah. So the abandoned animals that we usually rescue, they are usually in quite a bad state, so either malnourished or injured, or usually need critical medical attention. Yeah.
Another common reason for releasing animals into the wild is the religious act of merit release.
And obviously, the last example is very broad is mercy release, when people, due to religious reasons, go out and release a very, very broad, many animals.
Merit release is a religious practice followed by some Chinese Buddhist and Theravada Buddhist followers. It involves the release of captive animals as a way of earning merit, which one earns when one performs a good deed. However, depending on how merit release is practiced, there can be terrible consequences.
Regarding the issue of the Vesak Day, every year we have been posting messages and advocating that you shouldn't be releasing these animals.
Another shocking incident took place in 2004. Rangers at the Central Catchment Nature Reserve found more than 100 dead quails. These quails were released on grounds of merit release. Unfortunately, they were unable to survive in the environment into which they were released. Ironically, the manner in which some practitioners carry out merit release is questionable, even on religious grounds. Venerable Quang Ping from the Singapore Buddhist Federation was quoted saying that the practice has been misinterpreted and that people should not be ordering animals from shops to release them. This issue is especially prevalent in the period leading up to Vesak Day, a significant day in the Buddhist calendar. Indeed, the Singapore Buddhist Federation, together with other experts, have been active in advising devotees not to release animals for Vesak. Instead, they encourage alternative practices to mark Vesak Day, such as going vegetarian. We have now seen the causes and consequences of releasing animals into the wild. But what exactly has been put in place to prevent the release of these animals?
There is a Parks and Trees Act which states clearly that it's illegal for you to release animals into the wild. Currently, with regards to enforcement, NParks and PUB are active, right? And there's also AVS, or what used to be AVA, right? And they're the government body that also helps to figure out which species are the ones which we should be bringing in. Right? So a lot of the rules can be found online.
Despite the laws that have been put in place, one wonders whether they are truly effective. While the effectiveness of the law is unclear, the appropriate stance is clear as day. One should not be releasing animals into the wild. The seemingly simple act of releasing an animal, once out of sight and out of mind of the releaser, can lead to far-reaching consequences. Ecosystems are, after all, complex webs of elements, each contributing to the maintenance of precarious equilibria in nature. Perhaps, before carelessly releasing an animal into the wild, one should think of this ecological backdrop and consider what one tortoise could possibly do to an ecosystem.